Welcome back. This is You Ask, We Answer, where once a week we take your questions from Twitter, from our site, from comments, from your emails, and answer them to the best of our ability on camera. Today, we'll start off the show with a bunch from Gordon, a regular reader. Gordon's first question is, what happens to Apple when Steve Jobs leaves? That's a good question. We've kind of covered this several times, especially much earlier this year when he was on medical leave. And we kind of saw what happened to Apple when Steve Jobs leave, and the answer is not much, at least in the short term. Tim Cook, who's Apple's chief operating officer, ran the company very well while Steve was out. Obviously we don't know what influence Steve had on some of the products that Apple announced this year while he was out, like the 27-inch iMac and the new iPhone. But we get a feeling that Apple, could do pretty well in the short term without Steve. Longer term, that's a different story because Steve, is the kind of the brain behind a lot of the stuff Apple does. No doubt the iPhone would have been much different without Steve's input. No doubt the Apple tablet, if it exists, if it's really going to come next year, would be a different product without Steve's input than with it. So long term, without Steve Jobs, Apple will probably not be the same company it is today. But short term, they have enough talented engineers and executives to make things work. Next question from Gordon. Will some new company arise and marginalize and out-Google Google? Great question. Again, this is something a lot of companies try to niche away at little pockets of the search market. And then there's also companies like Microsoft that try to make these big new things like Bing that they think will take a lot of share in a short period of time. It's going to be very hard to out-Google Google because Google has a huge scale advantage. They see a lot more of the search market than anyone else, so they can make tweaks more effectively than other players. And also just remember the search market in general is much larger now than it was, say, 5-10 years ago. If you're going to get 5-10% of the search market, that's a lot more individual people to convert than it was 5 or 10 years ago. So for the short and medium term, it seems that Google is in really good position. The question is what happens with Bing and Yahoo once they converge and start sharing technology. But it's hard to see anyone taking meaningful share from Google, at least what we've seen so far. Remember Cool, they didn't take anything from Google. Will AOL ever be relevant again or a powerhouse? This is also from Gordon. We'll see. That's one of the questions we're going to be looking for the answers to over the next year or so. AOL, of course, trying to radically reconstruct itself into a sort of Time Inc. for the 21st century under Tim Armstrong, who used to be the sales director at Google. We saw this week their newest plans are kind of an automated robotic newsroom where thousands of freelancers around the country get assignments for news stories. We'll see if that works. We'll see if the quality is there, if the stories are interesting enough, if the AOL can handle all the editing, and finally if they can make that business profitable. Remember, a lot of AOL's profits still come from their dial-up business, which is shrinking. So, Tim Armstrong could either make AOL into a massive online publishing beast, or it could be a total flop. We'll see. Last question from Gordon. Is Windows 7 going to bring Microsoft, Intel, and Dell back to their past glory, or is it over? Will be hard for them to return to past glory because each of them has changed kind of a lot of the composition of their business, especially some of the hardware guys. Well, at least Dell, which is moving a little away from the desktop computers. Windows 7, the big question here is whether companies are going to upgrade because they did not upgrade to Windows Vista from XP, at least not nearly as much as Microsoft was hoping. So it's not if, obviously consumers are going to go out and buy new computers and they're going to ship with Windows 7 pre-installed, but are big companies going to order thousands and tens of thousands of Windows 7 licenses? Probably. I mean, what else are they going to do? They have to replace their computers at some point, and at some point XP is not going to work. Probably not the glory days as the past, but I don't see any trouble for them. John, is it too late for Palm? The Pre and WebOS and the Pixie have disappointed me at least so far. A lot of the complaints from the geeks are that the hardware quality is not there. The biggest problem for Palm right now is distribution and developers. Palm right now is only on Sprint. It's the third largest US carrier. It's shrinking. That's not the best place to be the only place to sell your goods. If next year they can sell their products at Verizon and AT&T, which are the biggest, as well as in some foreign countries, maybe Palm can make it on their own. The other problem, developers, of course, there's only a tiny handful of Palm WebOS apps compared to the iPhone. yeah, you could say that quality is there versus iPhone, but I don't see that either. So what Palm needs are, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. They need more developers and they need more buyers of their phones. And you know, with more apps come more buyers, with more buyers come more apps. Palm's best hope, of course, is to be bought out by someone like Dell or Nokia or Research in Motion or Microsoft. Whether that's going to happen, we'll see. Probably not too late for Palm today, but in a year, if they don't radically grow their market share and become profitable and things like that, it could be too late for Palm. From Media Man, I was recently laid off by a major business magazine after roughly a decade of service. It hasn't quite sunk in yet. What's the first thing I should do? And does it make sense to get out of the reporting business altogether? Is it unrealistic to think I can maintain my current standard of living? All very good questions. What should you do first? Well, first thing you should do is start a blog because you know, that's where the media industry is growing, and you should learn skills like how to manage your own content management system, how to edit pictures in a program like Photoshop. These are skills that, you know, unless you can get a great job at one of the business magazines for 10 more years and then retire, you're going to have to learn these skills if you're going to make an impact on the web. So start a blog. It's a living resume. It'll get people in the industry reading your stuff, maybe people who weren't reading it before. And, you know, and we'll see. I mean, reporting online is a lot different from reporting in print. And some people will be able to make the jump and others won't. Comic Book Guy asks, in a fair fight, who would win, Tim Armstrong or Carol Bartz? Those are, of course, the CEOs of AOL and Yahoo. I got Carol on this one. I think Tim is probably too nice of a guy to not let Carol win. At least in a fight. In business, no, obviously. And Kevin asks, how much traffic does SAI get and how much revenue are you making per unique visitor from advertising? We are a private company and we don't have to answer these questions, but you can go to quantcast.com and see some estimated traffic stats for businessinsider.com. You would see that globally we've grown to about 2.4 million unique visitors in November. That's up from about 1.5 million unique visitors about 6 months ago. So those are not exact stats from our internal pages, but it's a fair approximation, and that's something that's publicly available online. Thanks for watching. We'll put up instructions again next Monday for how you can get your question answered. We have some questions from today that we want to do some more research on and we'll answer next week. But thanks again.